Hello, welcome to Balisong Meet the Makers. I'm your host, Chell Wong, and today we have Aaron Gudgel from Frankenforge. Now, despite being only 20 years old, Aaron has already come out with 4 handles and 4 blades on his Volt platform, which includes the Voltaic, the Ion, the Galvanus, and the Amp. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
One of my first questions for all my guests, unless it's their real name, like Jay, how'd you get your name? Your name's not Frank. And I was like, oh.
No, it's actually kind of an interesting story. So I started with bladesmithing, not with balisongs, not machining. It was hammer on anvil stuff, and yeah. So there's a bit of history, and so I made my own propane gas forge, and I
Oh
welded
my
it
god.
out of an old like wheel well. And my father showed a picture of it to one of his coworkers, and he's like, "Oh, that looks like a Frankenforge or like a Frankenstein forge." And then the name just kind of stuck from there. So it's an interesting name, yeah.
All right. I have done a little bit of like welding and smithing with a forge. And that is it is really hard to make nice and consistent blades with that. It is
It is.
exhausting too.
Yeah, there's a reason I switched to machining.
So, speaking of which, how did you switch to machining and eventually making balisongs?
Okay, so hammer on anvil stuff. I did that. I started that when I was 15. So I've been doing that for a little bit. And then when I moved to Florida, I sort of got a better shop set up and stuff like that. And I sold a bit at some knife shows and stuff like that, but it wasn't much. And then a friend introduced me into the balisong world, and he was like, "Hey, I kind of want to make a blade for." It was a Chab clone blade. If you go back to my Instagram, it's the first balisong I posted, and then people in the balisong community saw it, and they were like, "I kind of want a blade," and
Hmm.
that's kind of just how it went. And so it
So you
was,
started with reblades, huh?
yes. So I did a lot of referee blades. I started in the community in like 2022, so like the last like peak of like everyone getting in and stuff like that. And I've made hundreds of rubbery blades, either by hand forged like Damascus stuff.
Wow.
I ended with machining. It's still my number one most requested thing to go back to, which is, yeah.
Huh. So you were doing handmade like rep blades.
Yes,
That's
I made a
crazy.
lot of them, which was I was not expecting to stumble into. But I was just like, okay, this business can go from here, and yeah, that's a good starting point.
So I guess how did you then end up starting your own knives, your own handles, and your own platform?
So the business was going. I was making some money. I was putting some money into equipment, and I was like, well, I kind of want to make my own handles and stuff like that. So I bought some like manual equipment and was like, okay, this isn't really it. And so I decided to get a CNC machine for growth of reblades, an easier way to make them so I can spend less time just pushing out the reblades that people just needed a blade for the reps because everyone's making handles, nobody's making blades. And so from there I got the CNC equipment and just started making other stuff because I can do it now. And so I started with the Galvanus, which was my first knife. This is an older variation of it on the rep platform. So the original Galvani run on the rep platform, which is an
Wow,
interesting
I had no
fact.
idea.
Yes, it wasn't until a year and a half ago or something like that that I switched to the Volt platform, which I currently everything I make runs on that, so it's all compatible.
Gotcha. So did you make the Voltaic before you made the Volt platform? Like, was it like you had the Galvanus and then the Voltaic, and then you were adapting the Galvanus to match the Voltaic? Or was it just that I'm making a new platform, and now this new knife I'm also doing the Volt is on that too?
All right, so this is Voltaic. It's a Chanwich. Yeah, it's Chanwich. It's Chanwich titanium, and I didn't like the horns on the rep platform. The rep platform is fine, but it's a little aggressive when you're flipping. It'll catch you. Um,
Yeah.
and so I designed this on my own platform, and then just kind of was like, well, I have to make two different blade shapes. I have to buy different stock. It's a whole thing. So let's just switch it. And so I made the switch. And I actually restarted serials on these. So
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I never really thought about how reps had like aggressive horns. Here's like a rep, and here's your amp. But one thing I did notice was that you had really short, wide Zen nipples, which I thought were nice because you just could not get pinched on those.
You cannot get pinched, and I like that design. Oh boy, what was the? I did a PDN reblade, or PND. Which one is it? The one that Turbo does.
PDN, Puddin.
PDN. Yeah. I did a reblade for one of those, and I noticed that those horns were just tiny, and I just really liked that over all the rep reblades I was doing, and that kind of stuck with me. It was like, okay, small horns are the way to go.
Meanwhile, I have several Hom knives which have quite impressive horns. It's not so much the horns for me as much as getting pinched by a rep that hurts so much.
It just hurts. And when you can design around that, it just makes sense to do.
Yeah, so I love your short. I had a Galvanus Chungus, which was especially wide.
It's like a little much, yeah.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it too, and at the time I didn't have a one of these to disassemble it, so I wanted to keep. I like how the American Tanto looks like a harpoon, but like the Japanese Tanto on the amp is just like one of the most neutral flippers I've ever flipped, which is really satisfying for me.
Yeah, I quite like the Japanese Tanto. It's really fun to go with slightly lighter. I do slightly lighter knives. I think the community as a whole is moving away from the heavy stuff. Yeah, because it's just so much less tiring to flip a 3.5 ounce knife than like 4.5.
Chab.
Yeah, like a chab.
4.5 I can do. It's 5 ounces plus that get me really tired. 4.6 maybe even. So I guess I know now that you're making a folder, but before we get to you talking about your folder that you're currently in the process of designing, I guess how did you go through the process of making a Galvanus and then an amp, and then also now you have the Ion? Like, what are the differences, and what do you? Because also like the Ion has like this one has holes in it and some don't. So like, what do you feel like constitutes a variation versus like a whole model in of itself?
Okay, so with the Galvanus, I've been through a couple different variations. I'd have to go through all the small details, but the Galvanus was my first design. It was kind of just like, let's put something on paper, let's figure something out. And I really liked it, and other people really liked it. It's been my most popular design by far, so like the first one did really well. And then I wanted to play with the titanium market, and so I had to change some designs. I added a weight system, which is different in older versions of it. And I can't do channel titanium due to horsepower requirements on my milling machine. So I had to do it Chanwich. And it's just a completely different design, so I just went with a different design. As for
can you back up? You said you couldn't do titanium channel because of what?
Horsepower requirements, so torque.
Wow, okay.
So I actually do have a channel titanium design. It's the static. I just can't mass produce it. I've made a few of them, but it's actually my favorite knife I've ever made. I just can't make them right now. It's the whole thing. And just, okay, so I can get a little nerdy. You may not want to leave this in, but you take, the way I cut channels is you can actually see it in your amp, is if you look inside there, there's, you take a circular slitting saw. So imagine this is a circle saw, and it goes in and it cuts it like this.
Yeah, the horizontal way, right?
And it cuts it out. And that uses an 1.5 inch slitting saw with a bunch of teeth. And due to me having a reasonably low tech mill, because I can't afford the super expensive stuff, one of the sacrifices on this mill is it has low horsepower. It's like 1 horsepower, which is fine for like aluminum and stuff like that and for small cutting. But when you get to that 1.5 inch bit, the requirements to machine titanium, you need to take aggressive cuts, and it stalls out the machine, and I just can't really do it. I've tried it. And so on my next machine purchase, which I'm looking at in the future, that's a big requirement, is it has to be able to run that for that design.
I actually never realized that, like, the amount of horsepower, and it's, so I'm like, okay, like, aluminum we all know is softer than titanium, but I never thought about, to make a channel titanium, you would need to be able to, like, have a strong enough machine to just be able to take out this much material at a time, opposed to, I guess, a sandwich or sandwich design where you can make slabs and maybe cut it in a different way, where it's not just let's have this hollow area in the middle. And that's actually really fascinating. So Chanwich was actually out of a necessity, and not because of like a market trend or because it's the cool hot thing, but because you literally could not produce a channel titanium. That's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yes. I like Chanwich. Chanwich is a good idea. It has a lot of parallelism difficulties with being parallel between the pivots because there's a whole thing. But the weight system is just a good idea, and so it was a nice
Yeah.
benefit. But I'm making twice as many parts for the handles, and the material cost is twice as much as well with it. So it's much more expensive to make.
Unsurprising. So I have an Ion right now, and it uses, I
Yes,
believe, brass pins as the weight system.
yes, it
Not
does.
unlike the Phobos, which I know uses like the same as the Zen pins but as the weights instead of brass pins. Is the Voltaic like that too, or is it the earlier versions that are different?
So the Voltaic uses those brass pins as well. I used to machine my weights. You know how Machine Wise does his weights? They're
Yep.
individually. They were very similar to that. Having extra parts to machine is a nightmare, especially when you
Mm,
don't have that palletized. And so I stepped away from that because it was just causing issues. And it's just like, okay, what can I find off the shelf that I don't have to make? And the pins was just really simple. Um,
yeah,
the pins have consistency issues, though. Some of them are thicker, some of them are taller, and that causes
that is what I'm
issues.
learning. Yeah,
Yes.
I haven't tried all of the pins in here because there's 6 of them in this box, and one of the pins I've actually arguably ruined using pliers trying to get it out.
Yeah.
Um, but so it's a matter of the pins being inconsistent opposed to the holes in the actual handle itself.
It's a bit of both. That's one of the runs, which it looks like you have. I changed how I was cutting out those pin pockets because I cut the pin pockets to a very tight tolerance so the pins don't rattle. Because if you put the pin in
Gotcha.
and then you shake it and it rattles, it's super
Oh, that would
annoying.
drive me crazy.
Exactly. And so I was trying a different way to do that. And over time, throughout the run, so when I started it, they were just perfectly on size. And the tool wore down throughout the run, and I didn't check it. And so
Hmm.
some of them came undersized. The ones that I did check were correct. And then a couple of them came out undersized. I made a bunch of them, and then a lot of them got burned in a truck fire. So it didn't end up being an issue. That's another
Was
fun
that
story.
insured?
No, it was not.
Um, wow, that is not the kind of breakage I would have expected. I know
No.
about machining failures. I know about just, tolerances and bits and what. A truck fire, bro?
Yeah. So I work at Blade HQ, and they order a large amount of knives at a time, 12 of each units, which is a pretty large order for me. Um, and so I was shipping it to them, and they got burned in a truck fire, which was unfortunate. So I had to redo that entire thing.
Wow, that
But
sucks.
yeah, it did save me the issue of having to deal with a bunch of people being like, "Hey, our pins don't work," and I'd be like, "Ah, nuts." So it did save me that.
Shucks.
So yeah, that's a fun little tidbit.
Well, better that batch than, a different batch and then be like, I have to fix all these pins and I have to redo all the ones that got fucking burned
Exactly.
up.
So a
Oh,
couple of
man.
them did make it into the wild, but I think it was only a couple. And most people don't actually ever even put the pins in. So
Yeah, I told Cream Soda, I'm like, yeah, these pins don't fit. He's like, oh, I had no idea, never tried. And I'm like, I figured you didn't, but as part of my reviews, I feel like I gotta at least try. Um, but I guess so your Ion, I believe, is the newer of the 4. What was part of the process of getting from like the Voltaic to the Ion, and what were maybe some things that you wanted to change?
Voltaic is a fun design, but I really wanted to play with more rounded or adaptive designs because the Voltaic and the Galvanist are flat faced, and you happen to
Ah,
have two of my round ones. So I had the amp, which is a round design, and I figured I should match it with the titanium design. Um,
okay.
and so this is the original concept of the Ion. A friend actually designed it, and
Whoa,
yeah, it's very different. Um,
looks like a high
but
roller, kind
it,
of.
I don't know what that is. I'm bad.
Oh,
I don't know a lot of balisongs.
the...
And so people will be like, these things looks like that, and I have to go look it up to know what they're talking
yeah,
about.
bro. It's like not like a totally different thing, but like I don't play Magic the Gathering very seriously, but people be like, "Oh yeah, it's like this card but blah." And I go, "Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, having definitely not played this game for the past 30 years." Like
Yeah,
this that game is so old. I don't know what the fuck half of these cards are, but it's kind of funny that you don't know a lot of the other designs. That said, the High Roller is like a handmade kind of not super common knife.
I know most of like the common ones. Like if they're in production and they're reasonably popular, I'm gonna know what it is. Um, but yeah, so that's an original one that actually went to Blade Show last year, and a lot of people
Oh,
liked it.
sick.
So I decided to continue it. And then I don't know, 8 months later, I came out with this, which is slightly different. This one has slots and doesn't have the whole pattern. I intend to do more patterns, but it's slightly rounder. It's not round. It's chamfered, but it's a really shallow chamfer.
Gotcha. I
Versus,
do like the roundness of these actually. I forgot that the Galvanus actually it was kind of like there's like a groove that goes through, right? It's like almost like an H. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, somebody explained it as an X. Which,
An X, yeah. Or if
yeah,
you're holding it the other way, an H.
yes. And so that's a full slot down the middle. It didn't actually used to have those extra little nubbins on the end. It used to just be a full straight slot, but I didn't feel like that was grippy enough, so I added those.
They had a jimping of sorts.
Yeah, it had the side jimping on the chamfers and it had the
Hmm.
jimping here, but it didn't have inside of the face those extra cutouts. If that makes sense.
Gotcha. So like it's interesting because you don't have like version numbers. Like there's like the version 1.6 cycloid and it's now in the 2.1, and then there's the V3 Kraken. But like I noticed that there's always like as you said, there's slight variation. Like this one has holes, and that Galvanus has like the jimping, whereas some don't. Is there a reason? Like, is there because sometimes I feel like you make several that are different.
Okay, so I did have versions on the original Galvanist run. V2 is actually this added slot thing, so this is a V2 Galvanist on the original platform. I didn't carry over the V2 to it on the Volt platform. Um,
Gotcha.
I just decided to keep that. And then other variations are kind of one-off things or things I mess with. I like
Okay.
testing things, and a lot of my tests, sometimes I don't end up doing them. Sometimes they just end up as a blemished unit or as a one-off. Um, and so, like the slot and the holes are two different variations of the same knife. They're not different version numbers. I sell
Okay.
both of them currently. I don't. I think this is the only Ion I have on the site right now. But they're both available, and I make both variations. And then my other knives, I don't have any other variations. The Ion is the only one that I keep like large handle variations, and so that's another new thing I'm playing with, kind of figuring out that.
So, I guess also one thing I'm curious is that you have several blades. Like there was the American Tanto, which I don't currently have, but there's also this Kukri, this Japanese Tanto, and now you have a trainer that was a much more recent creation of yours. I guess you can tell me
Yes.
about the process of designing the blades and maintaining all of these for the same platform, and just how did you go about that?
Okay, so having started with Ray Blades, I've done so many blade designs. A lot of customers would just
Fair
come to me
enough.
and say, like, I want a blade for this and I want this shape. And so I've designed hundreds of blades. Um, and so going from there, I figured out kind of what my favorite blade shapes were. And that's where I started with the Japanese Tanto. And then it kind of gets boring when you do one blade shape over and over. So originally, the Galvanist was going to have the Japanese Tanto, and the Voltaic was going to have the Western Tanto. And they were going to be two separate things. And when I combined them, I decided to make the blades compatible just for ease of manufacturing. I can swap them. And then I added a kukri to the lineup because I felt like I still needed another one. Um, and then the trainer I added recently because it's a cheaper blade that you can get in at a little bit of a lower price point. And
Mm-hmm.
then keeping everything on the same platform makes it really easy. When I run blades, I run 18 blades at a time, six of each one.
Wow.
I run them all through. I put them in a pile. When I go through and assemble everything individually, I pick when I'm assembling, like, okay, this is going to be a Tonto, this is going to be that. And I just know it's going to work. It is so simple.
Huh. I also so yeah, also like the thing is like Canadians can't have live blades, so I don't know if that's a factor, but and also some people just don't want live blades, but it's always good to
Yes,
have a trainer availability. Is it like a lot lighter than the others?
it's about the same. I designed it to be about
Wow.
the same. I think it's slightly lighter, but with the
Gotcha.
trainer, I wanted to keep the weight distribution. I didn't want to keep all the weight in one spot. So if you noticed on all life blades, there's always that tang weight because there's no bevel reduction. And then I made sure
Hmm.
to take the weight out where the bevel would usually be so that it
Okay.
feels as close to it as you can get.
Gotcha. That's really cool. So one thing I feel like is that trainers I feel like should flip very similar to the live blade because again, not everyone can have live blades. Not everyone
Mhm,
wants live blades. Some people just want to flip, and so I feel like when the trainer, like, 'cause so many trainer blades are just so much lighter, I don't find it. I like neutral, so I don't really find it enjoyable. But if a trainer matches the flipping experience, as close as it can be, then it
mhm.
at least feels like the same product instead of being like a not as good one. I'm also noticing that like this amp that I have right now has like a bunch of these holes, whereas all the ones on your website have like lines and then like a small hole opposed to like the sort of aggressive sort of bit
Yes.
here.
You also notice, I think that one has, does that one have a back hole that goes all the way through? Or,
Yes, it does.
okay,
Down
so
here.
you have one of the very early amps.
Ah,
That's silver, right?
yes it is.
That, I think those handles are from a Chungus. Did those get stolen from a Chungus?
Maybe I don't know. It's possible that these handles were from a Chungus, and it's possible that these handles were supposed to go on the Chungus American Galvanus one, and I was gonna try and swap them both, and then keep the Galvanus. I don't remember honestly, but I was just like, "What the fuck is?" Yeah, so it seems that like it ended up. I almost reassembled the knife to how it was supposed to be because all these knives they just keep getting passed around by the same people.
Yeah,
That's really
I
funny though.
the only unanodized handles I've ever sold, if I remember correctly, are with the Chungus. So those, I think those have to be from a Chungus. Uh,
I guess so.
I mean, the compatibility works. It's exactly how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I
If you
love
wanted,
this too.
yeah. So that's a fun one. That's an old prototype. And then I kind of, it was a little too light in the handles for my taste, especially with other blades. The Japanese Tonto is the lightest blade, so you put a heavier
Gotcha.
blade on, and then it's a little blade bias,
Blade
and
bias.
that was an issue because I don't like blade bias. Nobody likes blade bias, and
Yeah.
so I removed that, and then I thought the holes, they looked a little wonky, and so I got rid of them.
I will say that my experience with the Galvanus with American Tanto, which might have also been a Chungus, it was like slightly blade bias, but it's still really enjoyable. But I was like, these two are similar enough that I kept only one of them. I ended up keeping this one. One thing I am curious about is that I see that you are starting to make a folder, and you're not the
Yeah.
only one. Machine Wise is the Sonora, and it seems that Grant from Fellowship Blades is also making his own folder. I guess can you tell me about that? Like, why are you making a folder and the process behind that?
Okay, so I'm making a folder because I like folders. I carry folders. I have a pretty okay folder collection. It's nothing insane. Um, but balisongs, as sacrilegious as this is going to sound, aren't my favorite knives. I like folding knives. I like utility knives. Um, I'm not a huge flipper. I can flip. I understand what makes a good knife. I'm not hugely into the hobby. It sounds a little sacrilegious, but I like knives. And so I was like, okay, let's make a folder. And I've had a couple attempts at it. I had a prototype a year ago. Um, didn't like it. And so I've been working on this, and the design and work that goes into making something like this versus a balisong is just so much more work because there's a lot of moving parts. You have to get lockup down. You can't have, balisongs, if you have a bit of play, it's fine. A folder, if you have a bit of play, you're going to get raked over the coals and murdered for it. Um, and so it's so much work. And I'm learning, because this runs on bearings, balisongs run on bushings. I'm learning bearings. Um, it's a whole thing. So I enjoy it. I like it. I finally have something that's probably going to get released for the next few months. But is it a lot of work?
Do you have a name for it yet?
No, I had a post where a bunch of people commented names, and I'm going to go through those and see if I can find one I like. But my
I
main,
did comment. I don't remember what I said though.
yeah, I have to go through that. I looked at it briefly and then was like, I'm busy, and then forgot about it. So I need to figure out a name still. Right now, it's the folder.
The what?
The folder.
Oh, the folder. Yeah, it's so funny too because I know like some people, Battlesong people have said that like one thing is that like the number of times you action a folder is like maybe once and then twice when you fold it back, whereas like a Battlesong actions like a lot every time you
Mhm.
spin it. But also, it's interesting that you say kind of the opposite in that like the demand of tolerances is so much higher in folders, because I guess like people just have a high expectation. There's already so many folders out there that if your folder is suboptimal, it's probably just like it's gonna get completely buried. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
That it's also that like the number of moving parts, I guess, in the lock. I don't know a lot about locks because I flip. I like knives. I think knives are cool, but for the most part, I don't really see the reason of collecting folders, largely because I already have so many knives, and I have knives because I flip. So just I'm not familiar with all these different locking systems. That's also a thing that I'm just not
Yeah.
familiar. So it's interesting that your primary focus as a maker is balisongs, but now that you're more of a folder person, that you're doing one for yourself. Like, do you plan on like pivoting to just making different folder designs, or just more like this is a side project because your expertise is in balisongs?
To answer that question, I don't know. I want the folder to do well, but I do not plan on abandoning balisongs anytime soon. It's where I got my start. I know how to make them. Everything I have set up for manufacturing is for making balisongs. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the community quite a bit, even though it's not my favorite knife ever. I still quite like them. It's not like, ooh, I hate balisongs. I like balisongs. Don't get me wrong. I have a collection. I'm friends with a lot of makers, and I don't know. I like the community. They're great people. It's a much smaller community than the overall folding world. So as the hype of balisongs goes down a little bit after the peak that it was at a couple years ago, it's harder and harder to stay relevant, especially with like Instagram and stuff really pushing on it, which is where most of the balisong community is right now. It's Instagram. And so it's very difficult to, I'm looking at this long run, and I'm looking at this trajectory of like, okay, sales are slowly going down. It's fine for now, but I need to open my market up. I have the capability. I have the name right now. So let's try something and see if it goes somewhere. Because, balisongs, there's the largest balisong creator is probably Will Hirsch or something like that. Where
Squid. Well, you mean as a
yes,
influence,
as kind of a reviewer influencer, and so it's like
sure,
that's like Will Hirsch or like Big Flips, right?
Yeah, well, he's more tutorials, but it's like Will Hirsch, Artsy, maybe Den BMX, maybe me one day. But they
have like just over 100,000 subs, somewhere around there. And so that overall balisong community is relatively small compared to a lot of other communities, especially the people buying the really high-end niche stuff. It's a pretty small market, whereas folders have a much larger appeal and market. I know a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm so interested in your knives and stuff like that, and people I meet, and they want something for either work or whatnot, but because I make balisongs, they have no interest in that. Because they want a folder or something they can put in their pocket or take to work or show off to their buddies, especially mostly older gentlemen, usually. And so it's a huge market that I just haven't been able to touch, and trying my hand with a product like this is going to help me be able to sustain this, possibly long run, expand my business, make better products, make more products.
Fair enough, yeah.
And so I want to try it. We'll see. It might be a dud. It might do nothing, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, that's the impression I'm getting also from Machine Wise and Fellowship, in the sense that like the folder market is bigger, but also with that, it's like as balisong makers, I don't know a lot. There's surprisingly little overlap in certain ways, and I don't necessarily know if like, oh, this is like I remember seeing one of the like first reviews for the Sonora. It's like, oh yeah, it's from this balisong company, and like they made this like and it's like how little they knew about it was interesting. So I don't know if it's necessarily going to be able to be like, oh, here's this hot new item, because again, there's so many folders out there. I also don't necessarily know what the like. It's weird because my cousin was like, what's the point of owning more than one balisong? And I'm like, because they all feel different. And me personally, I'm like, what's the point of owning more than one folder? But it's a it's so hypocritical at the same time. But I don't know. It's just interesting to think. Like, I obviously want you all to succeed. I want you to have business ventures that turn out well and are able to sustain. Because fucking capitalism and this economy and all that shit. Like, so I always just am, I want everyone to succeed. I want people to do well. I want business to be good. But I'm also, it's always just interesting to see like the market shift and trends in makers, and being able to talk to makers and having their opinions on things. So I guess, is there something from your design philosophy from Balisongs that you're bringing to your folder?
That's a good question, and I don't fully know that answer. So there's not a lot that converts. It's a different size. You're not worried about it flying out of your hands when you're spinning it real quickly. You're not worried about a perfectly smooth action. If it sits like this and doesn't swing, it's fine as long as it, drops like that. Um, it's just so different. I honestly don't know. That's I've
That's
never
a
I
totally
haven't
fair and valid answer.
yeah, it's just
Like,
it's very different. And so you could say like the actual design ideas are similar, as in like they match well. But besides that, I don't really
yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting too, just because they're so different. Like, I don't know. I know that you're familiar with folders, but I don't necessarily know if, in terms of making, you're kind of like in like a frontier that you're not as familiar with, or you're struggling with like, oh shit, this is different, or like, oh,
know.
my brain and how I approach balisong making, and then I'm getting stopped up with the folder.
It's like jumping in the deep end. It's a little much because I go
Dang.
from having learned balisongs and designing balisongs and understanding what little tiny things mean, and exactly how to fix that when assembling and stuff like that, to something that I just like. Okay, I know how to machine things. I don't have to figure that out. But why is this not smoother? Why is there wiggle? Why when I close it is there a tiny bit of wiggle? Right. So I've been
Mm.
talking to some folder makers and stuff like that, and it's just a lot, and I'm getting it down. But there's going to be, and I know this, there's going to be issues when I first release this that I didn't know about, and so I'm being careful with that, with a kind of a post beta test to begin with the first
Yeah, I noticed
five or
that.
some odd units. Because when I started Balisongs, I had no idea what I was doing. Right, so I'd make it, and then in hindsight, it was terrible. But at the time, I had no idea, and so I'm trying to be very aware of that with this, and being like, okay, I think this is good. Is it actually?
Well, what were some of the things that you realized in hindsight were terrible, and how did you fix it moving forward with balisongs?
Okay, so when I first started with reblades, I'd come from kind of fixed blades and stuff like that, and I didn't understand the insane tolerance requirements for bushings. Um,
Yeah.
insane. If you're watching this, an out of spec balisong bushing or thickness of the blade, take this printer sheet of paper. It's about the thickness of a human hair. Split that 20 times, and that is out of spec.
Oh my god.
It is insane. So I couldn't do that.
In
Right, I didn't have the
in terms
equipment,
of diameter or in terms of thickness?
the thickness of the blade.
I
In
wonder why
terms,
my tunes are always so bad whenever I try and tune it at home. I don't have a bushing lap for a bushing, but I'm just trying to do the old fashioned way without a micrometer too. Jesus.
yeah. So two 10,000ths of an inch is what most people say on the blades, and that's a 20th of a sheet of paper, roughly. Um,
Wow.
and I've had issues with that being too much, and the bushing's binding when it's over that much. So
No, that's the
yes,
worst.
and so then I have to take the blade down like a 10,000th of an inch, which is half of that. And it gets really finicky, and you need very specialized, in some cases, ridiculously expensive machines to do stuff like that.
Gotcha. Wow.
Which is a huge barrier to entry to balisongs. Is folders, you're running bearings and not bushings, which is little ball bearings in a cage. And so
Yeah.
this dimension can be off by a mile compared to what can be off on the balisong, and it can still function at 90%. It's that last 10-20% where that really gets the action clean. But most people are never going to notice that, even if you're a folder person.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear like the vastly different challenges between making balisongs and making folders, and how you're. I mean, it's not like everyone in a creative field always steps in a lot of potholes, and you always learn things as you go. So I guess I was gonna ask you what's a little known difficulty about your process of making balisongs, but I guess That's one of them. I don't know if you have anything else in terms of the handles. You also like you enlightened me about the titanium channel being not possible on like lower powered machines.
Yes. So a small caveat to that: it is possible. It's just a pain to do consistently. So this is
Okay, yeah.
okay. So we can go a bit more into this. So this is with like a normal end mill. So you take your end mill and you come down, and then you cut it straight like this. So this is where I cut like this. The issue with that is parallelism. The tool deflects, especially right in here. You need that because the blade has to be perfectly precise. The washers and the bushing have to be perfectly precise. Where you clamp it on the handle also has to be perfectly precise. And using a keyway cutter, which is how I cut the aluminum, is incredibly precise and incredibly parallel.
Gotcha.
It's almost perfectly parallel. When you take an end mill and now you cut it like this, that introduces taper because that end mill deflects more at the bottom because it's not supported. And so it cuts a V much smaller than that. But it's where did those
What
come
the
from?
fuck? Wait. Wait, what the fuck happened? Was that your phone or is that the Riverside?
I have no idea what that was. I was like, why is he putting balloons up?
I am not cutting this out, by the way. This is fucking hilarious. We're like, at first I was like, what's in front of you? And then
it's like, balloons? Why are there balloons?
hello? Happy birthday? Happy birthday. Congrats on turning 20.
Thank you. I guess the balloons were kind of fitting.
Wow, that was weird and wild.
I completely forgot I was talking about.
You were talking about deflecting and it makes a V, and then the balloons came up.
Yeah, and so the V causes issue when you clamp it because it has inconsistent clamping pressure and it pushes the washers and it pinches the washers on one side, and then you have binding issues. So
have you ended up going through like a lot of handles that ended up being scrapped because they were like just a little off or whatever?
So thankfully with the aluminum handles, yes, the long answer. But the short answer, well, I don't know. Whichever answer this is. With the keyway cutting, it's kind of set and forget. I got it right one time, and it's been repeatable every single time.
Thank God.
Which is amazing because considering how perfect that tolerance has to be, that being just perfectly consistent is so nice because the galvanist is the easiest knife to assemble because I don't have to worry about that difference in thickness or parallelism. And
does that include the amp or just the galvanist?
Yes, anything that's channel aluminum or channel titanium would be super easy. And that's why I don't want to make this because I set up a whole palette and stuff like this. And I was going to make a run of 10 of these to start with. I got 2 of the 10 actually working properly after hours of messing with it. And so that was kind of just
20% success rate.
Yes, and that's time expensive in terms of machine, tooling expensive, setup expensive, fixture expensive. The actual material to make that is incredibly expensive. And so that was just like, okay, we're not touching this. We're not doing this. Like, it's technically possible. Brutal. But like I know Fellowship Blade, the Medusa has that. He has a lot better machines than me. He's probably a better machinist. He is a better machinist than me. And so, yeah.
I guess, can you explain what makes a good machinist versus, I don't know, a less good machinist? Because I assume you're at least a good machinist.
So I'm completely self-taught. I bought a CNC mill and was like, okay, let's figure this out.
Wow.
Which is not super uncommon, but like machine-wise, he worked in the industry for, he's worked in the industry almost longer than I've been alive. Grant was a machine repair, he has a machinist. I think his name is, what's his name? I don't remember his name, but a machinist works for him as a skilled machinist, and Grant worked with machinery and stuff for quite a while. And so they just understand a lot more about this. They were more traditionally taught. And so when there's an issue like that, they know how to fix it, whereas I don't know how to fix that, right? How do I get that?
Googling it, I guess?
Googling it, looking up YouTube videos. And so I've learned a lot through that, but it's not the end-all be-all, especially if I might be making this up, but I think Dayland was an aerospace machinist, which is like the top of the top. And so that kind of goes into his products, as you might be able to notice.
They're really good products.
Yes, exactly. And so I've had to learn all that, and I'm getting better, and I am like decent.
Yeah.
I know how to
like your products.
Yeah, thank you. I can make products. I'm at the stage where it's like, okay, I can do this with a level of consistency.
So interesting. I am by day a video game composer, and I'm also self-taught. Like I know music theory. I was originally going to be a band teacher, but I didn't learn composing, and I didn't learn like music production. And there are
Mhm.
definitely times that I feel that kind of like, oh, I wish I had the professional kind of background to be able to know how to do music production better. But that doesn't like I'm also an award-winning video game composer. You have really good products that I enjoy flipping, and I mean, obviously, not everyone has the same preferences, and some
Mhm.
people like some things and some people don't like others. But I like your products, and I think it's really impressive what you've managed to do. And when uh, you're pretty young. I am not as young. It's just like wow. Sometimes some people are so much more accomplished than I was when I was a fucking wreck when I was your age. Oh geez, now I sound even older saying that. So I guess if there's one thing I'm going to ask you left is there anything you would like to tell our listeners?
Solid question. So I wrote it down and I was like, okay, I should think of an answer to this before I get on here. And then I proceeded to not do that.
That's okay.
So what do I want to tell the listeners? You might have to give me a second.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm trying to think of something like important. Okay, this is going to be a little dumb, but I'm quite young and I'm successful. Like it's whatever. It's not like I couldn't live off of this business, but it's putting me through school. I'm going to school for mechanical engineering, and so I'm building a business. I enjoy it. I enjoy what I do. I'm still quite young, so I still live at home and stuff like that. So I have the benefit of not needing to support myself or to support a family, and and that's a huge barrier for a lot of people, is that they can't just be like, okay, well, I don't. It doesn't cost me anything to live. Let's try something, right? Something I would say to people is you're never going to get anywhere if you don't try something. I wouldn't be here if I didn't try to do something. I kind of stumbled into it at the end of the day, but I was doing something. I was trying. You miss all the shots you don't take, right?
Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
I don't know. It's kind of just like cliche and dumb, but try something, do something. A lot of people
Yeah.
just sit around and like watch YouTube videos or whatever, which I'm totally guilty of. I was watching YouTube videos right until we got on this call.
I was playing Bloodborne and I'm still fighting the stupid spider.
I could never get into the Souls games. They are just way too
Me
difficult
neither,
for me.
but my roommate got me into Bloodborne and I bounced off of Dark Souls super hard. And I will say, having someone who is into Bloodborne and also just Bloodborne, I feel is a lot less bullshit than Dark Souls. But yeah, I will say also, I think people kind of let the fear of failure control them, or definitely people think about how hard it is to fix something without actually trying to take this step. And yeah, it's hard to get over that hump, but sometimes once you do, it's a lot easier, and you're like, oh wow, it's yeah, and failure is the greatest teacher, and I think people are afraid of failing, and it can be really detrimental to the ability to progress. Whereas, like, if you can become comfortable with failure and being able to fail in a safe way, I know that like it certainly wasn't a pretty expense to be able to lose all the things for the attempt of the static, I bet, but like at least having the ability to fail without it being catastrophic, and seldom are things ever as catastrophic as people kind of make it out to be, but it definitely can be restrictive to people. So just sometimes being okay with failing and losing and then getting better and learning and growing and improving, and whatever we consider the best, some like you always kind of worry about the best, especially with flipping. People be like, they see all the best flippers because of course the most popular, most impressive stuff float to the top, and then people see them, they go, wow, I can't do that, and people feel maybe more likely to quit. And me, I have like plateaued, and I've like stopped learning new tricks, and I like keep meaning to like try and learn new tricks, and sometimes I learn something and then I instantly forget it because I don't incorporate it into like my flipping and my regular kind of like flow or whatever the fuck. But also it's like it's okay to not be the best. You can be good. You can be good. You can be really good. You can also just be okay. You could be mediocre. Some people who own Balisongs only know the basic opening. And you know what? if that makes you happy,
Exactly.
that
Like,
makes you happy, right?
yes, yeah. The fear of failure is a big thing, and I'm not like, oh, people are just afraid of fear. Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, sometimes just being like, okay, what is the worst thing that happens if I fail? If I start to make a design and I say, okay, I'm going to invest, some money into this, and we're going to try this, and say it does nothing, what's the worst thing that happens? Okay, I lose some money, I lose some time. Big deal. Let's go like big. Okay, my business failed. What did I lose? I go bankrupt. I'm not in any debt. I'm 20. I've lost nothing, right? I get restarted and my credit score is dead for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, right?
Oh, stupid credit score.
And it's like, okay, that's not a huge deal. I go get a job, I work my way through school, and then that's it, right? But I will say this: if my business failed tonight, I would not regret doing it or spending the last 3 years working on it for nothing. I've learned so much in terms of just being able to work, machining, and a lot of these skills that are transferable. I don't even necessarily care about that. It's just the amount I've learned and my ability to my self confidence has
Hell yeah.
greatly improved. It's like, okay, I can do this. I can do something. I can try something. So yeah, try something. Do something. If you fall on your face, big whoop. No, like you're your biggest criticizer. Or that's not the right
For
word.
sure. That
Like,
is so true.
yes, like I see that with myself. Like I know that I am my own worst enemy. I'm in my head way more than anyone else cares. Nobody cares. They're like, okay, this was cool, or this wasn't for me, or whatever. And it's like, right, I have to get this perfect. Oh, there was an issue with that. I'm gonna beat myself up over the pins being too small or being too big, right? Like, that was an issue for me. It's like, okay, crap, I got to deal with this. And so it's like, I'm sure like you're just like, oh, hey, the pins don't fit. Oh, interesting. We should probably talk to him. And I'm just like, oh no, the pins don't fit. This is the end of
Oh
the
no.
world.
Yeah,
And I know.
mean, but also the fact that you're willing to like take a look at it and fix it. And I mean, the tune's like it's like there's got a little bit of play, but like the fact that you're willing to look at it makes me just feel a lot more at ease. It's like, oh no, this thing doesn't work out, and then I told you, and you go, oh, I'll take a look at it, and I can send it back to you and go, oh great, well that's not a problem then. What is my light doing? I don't know. It's like nothing is changing. It's just flashing. But uh, I guess thank you so much for coming on, Aaron. It makes me really happy to hear that like your business is doing well enough to like put you through school and you're learning mechanical engineering. You're saying?
Yes, I just saw I was doing a business major and I decided I am wasting my time. This is worthless. And so I was like, okay, let's do engineering. I can do it. I can do math. I don't like it, but I can do it. So let's get an actual degree that if everything goes under, I can have an actual job. So yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times business, it's usually for like some big business or whatever. At least that's my experience for people who went to business school or like big suit stuff. But like if you're running your own business, you learn so much just by doing it. As you're saying, I'm a self-employed freelancer. I learned by doing. I've learned some stuff. I watched some like finance stuff, and I own a book about taxes to give you an idea. Like me, like things that made me realize I'm an adult. Talking about how cheap the gas was at Costco, being excited for a filing cabinet, and buying a book about taxes for fucking LLC, single person, sole proprietor, and S corp. And I'm like, wow. But also, I buy knives and I play and I don't know. It's like you don't have to lose yourself in all this stuff too.
Yeah.
But thank
taxes
you.
Are the worst. Yeah.
What's the worst?
Taxes.
Yeah, fuck taxes. And not like fuck taxes, but like fuck the process of filing taxes. That's the part that's fucked. I like the idea of my tax dollars going towards like, I don't know, fixing roads and education and not towards other things that I don't want. But that's a different topic.
That is a very different topic.
That's going to get really complicated. Anyways, thank you so much, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for tuning into this episode of Balisong Meet the Makers. Like and subscribe this channel for more. If you want to click that bell, get alerted to whenever there is a new episode of this podcast. And Aaron, aka Frankenforge, where can our listeners find you and buy your knives?
You can find me at Frankenforge Blades. Just look it up. I'm one of the top results, something like that. I don't know. It's not super difficult. It's a unique name.
All right, Frankenforge Blade. I will link your website and I guess your Instagram, just because I know that you have an Instagram as well. That'll be in the video description. And with that, thank you and happy flipping, everyone. Take care and enjoy flipping or just knives in general.